Hi, good evening, good afternoon, and good day. This is Bill of Voir-Barry, IBM's CTO for esports and video games. Quite an honor to be on this presentation, podcast, videocast today to talk about esports and video games. A little background myself, I've been with IBM in the game space 10 years now, probably about 15 years overall in the game and esports space. So it's quite an honor to kind of share my passion with you all today and talk about, what's going on, what are some trends, some of the things I do in my day job. It's pretty exciting. A lot of you probably are not aware that IBM is in esports, and yes, we are. We've had some great wins recently, which I'll talk about through our discussion today. But again, without further ado, let me go ahead and I'll start to share the presentation, and we'll get that up and kicking here. So bear with me. Okay, all right, good. So I'm going to go into presentation mode here and talk about what IBM is doing in the world of esports and video games. So again, the title of my topic today is Cognitive and Cloud. Imagine what you can do in esports and video games around the areas of engagement, insight, and operations. And so that's kind of the magic I've been doing the last several years in the world of games and esports, is using some of our IBM prowess to really tap into and connect with the game and esports space. One thing when I'm talking about the business of games or the business of esports and the business of what we do is like one thing I keep in the back of my mind every day is that the world of games and esports is a community. And I'm very honored to be part of this community. A lot of fun, a lot of engagement to be played in the world of esports and video games. And yes, IBM, we've been doing this for quite some time, believe it or not. Probably right now, close to probably 130 million people a day are playing on some form of IBM system, whether it's cloud or cognitive, AI, Watson, security, DevOps, anything that goes into, the making of a game in a game studio, or also production on the esports side. And yes, myself, I've been doing this for a long time. I enjoy immensely, my job bringing this immensely connected world of games and esports using some cognitive imagination. Again, just another day in the office. This experience, what you're seeing here, is at a major esport event. Again, little caveat, this is pre-COVID, and some of the things I do right now actually are part of COVID as well. So I'll talk about that a bit as well. So here I am, at a major event. In this example, I was working with a major Halo engineering team at a major esports event. So folks that have been to an esports event, you kind of realize that this is probably behind the stage of what's going on, right? So imagine you have 50 to 60,000 people in the audience in front of the stage, and then behind the stage is a lot of where the esports magic happens from the IBM side. So think about it. You have the engineers, you have the broadcasters, you have the community managers, you have the people talking to their blogs teams and whatnot. And traditionally, this has all been done manually, right? So let's look for something very cool or relevant in a stream or broadcast. Let's cut it and push it out to the audience. Let's look for things we can edit and tell a story. Let's grab that and push out to the audience. So again, I kind of picture the game world and esports world kind of as a two-way street. So you have the broadcast and you have all the direction going out to the audience, but then you have everything coming back from the audience as well, kind of chatter, what people are talking about, how people are engaging. And so a lot of what I do is tap into that, tap into that world. What are people talking about? What are people saying? And when we think about, what is esports and competitive gaming, we think about esports as the short form for electronic sports, very competitive, competition traditionally has been in large arenas in traditional professional environments. Even during COVID, right? It's kind of a mixed blessing to be in the game world because we were very active, right? Online, augmented reality, things that were going on, different types of genre and business development that was done to keep the game world connected. In fact, a little tidbit about my own job in IBM, my job actually increased dramatically, during the COVID period. Just some numbers for those that might be interested. These numbers were presented by Newzoo, a very well-respected esports business. As we look at some of the numbers, you'll see some of the adjustments over the years and the growth about esports in terms of revenue. And we're probably looking close to maybe, $2 billion by 2023 just for esports alone. And again, we want to look at the audience as well. Our audience has changed dramatically over the years. A lot of people you wouldn't think are part of the esports world, from occasional viewers and enthusiasts. And you look at the growth of that, again, very powerful growth in terms of the audience. On average, 11 to 14% year over year, including the enthusiasts, as well as those that are the occasional viewers as well. And again, we want to probably do away with some common, what we think about, some things that may be traditional or non-traditional, some things that folks may think about. For example, we have Fortnite's a good game to think about, right? Many people don't realize that a major portion of the players are actually women. Female players play Fortnite. And a lot of businesses that are now saying, hey, let's move to mobile esports and mobile video games is very keen and very important, to the industry. So let's put away some misnomers or some things that may be non-traditional to the world, are very important to think about in the attraction of esports and different types of audiences to this business model. So imagine, let's think about this. We talked about community. We talked about what people are thinking about, what people do or say in the esport world. We talked about that two-way highway or freeway, right, of the game and the audience, right? So imagine taking that, understanding what's going on in the world of competitive gaming and esports, and engage with them emotionally. So knowing who's playing, who's watching, what are the people talking about? How are they engaging? Is the game fun? Where do people really get into? What's something very cool and salient in the gameplay that we can grab and tap into? Maybe we can do some predictions. Are people going to churn from a game or move to different games or different genres of games? And what this cognitive AI can really do is it really engages and personalizes that esports experience. Create something very compelling to me, the audience. Because a lot of us gamers, we like to be catered to. It's like, hey, do something for me, apply to me. How does this mean to me, right? So those are a lot of things that we do to make it very cool and compelling. And then what you can do is you can really personalize that whole esport customer experience, understanding, what are people talking about? What's something salient? Is the game fun? Does the game suck? What are some things that are going on in the game? How can we do some engagement and analytics, to the publisher or to the provider? Because when you think about the esports ecosystem by itself, you have the publishers, right? Then you have the providers, either like a Star Ladder or an ESL, DreamHack type organization. Then you have the teams, right? All that going on, lots of data, lots of engagement. So how can we do things to really connect with the audience and the community? So for example, as a lot of these esport titles are now in the franchise mode, whether it be like an Overwatch or a Call of Duty or a CSGO, how do we connect? So the business executive is saying, how do I connect with my audience? Is the audience connecting with me? And that's something we can really do very strongly, imagining with that cognitive and AI experience, with the audience. So, people ask me, hey, Bill, what does cognitive AI really mean, right? So I think about it, simply stated, right? It's software that learns and interacts, analyzes, and produces, without explicit programming, right? So things that go on very naturally between us. So for example, say we're having a conversation right now, you and I can understand if you're being sarcastic. You can understand if I'm pulling your chain or telling something goofy or being sarcastic, those kind of things. And those are a lot of the things that are very natural and elemental to the world of esports. And other things too. So, just for the sake of the argument, pretend you're an esports executive, or maybe you're an esports operations director. You want to understand, how can I engage? How can I help with that fan engagement and the esports community provided? How do I make it easier, the fans to understand the game and connect with the teams and players? How do I build that mystique, right? For example, if we're talking about, Dr. Disrespect or Ninja, or here in North America, where I'm from, we also have AOC, who's now part of the Twitch world, which is very cool, right? So how do you build that mystique around the audience, the fans, the broadcasters, the streamers, the folks that are really part of that community. And at the same time, as a business, how do I reduce overhead and cost, right? How do I do things that are automated? So as I first introduced our conversation today, we talked about a lot of things that go on in the esports world traditionally have been very manually. Find a cool clip and broadcast and push it out to ESPN, or find a cool clip and broadcast. What is it going on Twitch or YouTube right now, right? And how do we do some automation of that so that you create a very personal experience for the gamer and the audience, and reduce some overhead on those that are in the trenches running that esport event for you as well. And think about some things that may be happening, right? Especially, I've touched briefly on COVID a bit during our conversation today, but think of all the things that need to go on to make that event happen now, because people are, in different places. You have the shopcaster one place, you have the team another place, right? You have the engineers and operators in another place. How do you bring that all together and make that happen? And that's using some of that cognitive and cloud and AI methodology to really create some cool experiences. And keep it behind the curtain like Wizard of Oz. So in one of our cool process that we put together on a daily basis is, think about it, taking a live broadcast and feed and breaking down the audio and video, tuning the language, because each game world has its own language, right? You think about StarCraft 2, versus LOL versus Call of Duty, right? Each community talks differently, right? So we look at the different types of languages and nuances and understand, how does the shopcaster talk? If she's doing the play-by-play, how is she keeping up? Are we able to help her tell a better story? For example, if you think about COVID right now, the whole family is watching the event. You got grandma, grandpa, Uncle Jerry, Aunt Louise, they're all watching right now, right? They're all watching. So maybe the shopcaster and the analyst has a bigger burden to tell that story to even non-traditional gamers. And how can you help them do that? We can provide them with storyline or critique or things to do, almost automatically using cognitive and AI to do that. We build a corpus of gameplay, history, bringing the data of current game, historical games from community sites and other repositories, and create something very compelling. It's all kind of stitched together architecturally, right? So my job as a CTO is to make sure that we're getting all those pieces together, whether it's a broadcast, a stream, a publication, those kind of elements to enable something very cool and compelling. Other things too. So think about this. This is something that's very exciting, right? As a result of our change in gameplay right now. Think about things about LED and augmented type broadcasts, right? Because believe it or not, a lot of those shoutcasting analysts, they're in their kitchen right now, they're in their bedroom right now. How do we create something very compelling, for them, so they're not sitting there in their kitchen or bedroom? How can we use some things like game engines like Unity to produce virtual environments, other types of environments to do that? So these are all the cool and compelling things that are both very business important to the business, as well as engaging the audience from the audience perspective. And again, what I'm showing here is just kind of a swag, if you will, of different types of use cases I've been doing the last several years, presenting to the audiences. Things like individual gameplay and balance, right? So you want to have some cool teams against cool teams, right? For example, reduce the time to create content, like we talked about, right? How do we reduce the workload from the broadcast and engineers to create something that's very compelling to push it out to a major stream? How can we do things, for example, like reduce toxicity in gameplay, right? Cognitive and AI is very strong at looking at that and analyzing different patterns. What is the tribe talking about? What are they saying? What are some things that we need to perhaps, block or talk about with community managers using cognitive and AI around some toxicity issues? Personal training, that's one of my favorites too, right? So a lot of these teams right now that are blossoming up around the landscape, these teams, they want to be good. They want to be better than good, right? So how do we create some training tools to do that? How do we create some training tools to do recruitment of esport players? How do we do things like testing automation and storytelling. So again, just a swag, if you will, of certain items I've been talking about and producing across the esport landscape. So here's a big one, right? So you think about the big monster in the room right now is mobile esports. Just awesome, right? How do you engage with the player, right? Maybe you're playing a mobile game like Guns of Boom, or maybe you're playing Overwatch, a mobile version of Overwatch. Maybe you're playing Diablo, mobile version and whatnot. So things you can think about is you can really engage in that mobile game play experience. Maybe some conversation elements would be very nice in there, bringing some natural language, understanding different languages. Maybe the time to speed for localization teams needs to be reduced by having different types of languages in there, like Korean or Chinese or German or French or Serbian, Montenegrin language. So think about it. All those things you can do to really compel and create a personal experience, for the game player in mobile games. Blockchain, that's an interesting story. People say, hey, I see the blockchain, the digital currency, all blossoming across the esport landscape as well. So the digitization of tokens and gameplay and skins and purchases, whether you're of legal age to do skins or this and that, based on your country regulation, blockchain is very effective in esports of really creating that community, right? A lot of terms we use sometimes is the democratization of games and esports using blockchain, which you think about it, is pretty true, right? Because you want to be inclusive, bringing more and more folks into the game and esports space. And blockchain is a very unique way, very powerful way to do that as well. And then we talked about some of the things you can do at the event using cognitive AI at the actual esports events. Tap into the crowd. What's the crowd cheering about? What are they saying? Are there emotions that are very strong? We can tap into the cognitive experience using that too, to understand what's the audience, how they're responding, what are shoutcasters talking about, which we talked about, those kind of things. All very compelling in the major events. And then we think about live events, you got the engagement, performance, and optimization. So a lot of things that we do around like stadiums and arenas, for example, are very key in that esport world as well. So you think about developing, designing, maybe safer places for communities, non-touch, non-spatial environments, using more augmented reality, AR and VR, bringing people back to a sense of place again, right? This one I touched on, but let's dive in a bit deeper, right? So a lot of these teams are thinking, how do I do player recruitment? How do I recruit, my next rock star, such as Yellowstar, for example, or some others, Laser, Rotterdam? How do I bring them into the gameplay, right? So using the cognitive AI, going out into the blogs and into the game spaces to find who's that next rock star, who's going to be the next Scarlet in StarCraft 2, right? To understand that. And it's something very key and exciting, for the cognitive and esports player and recruitment of new teams. So that is my event for today. And I thank you very much. I look forward to receiving your questions and chatting with you all further. And I hope you've enjoyed, today's event.